Three, two, one, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in a DeLorean? Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly, the podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly?
This episode of Does It Fly is presented by ScreenUK.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Does It Fly? I'm Tamara Krinsky, and I'm here with my co-host.
I am Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi, the nerd, the in-house nerd. Let's call me that.
Does that mean when you leave the house, you're not a nerd anymore?
I'm even nerdier.
The outside nerd is greater than the inside nerd.
Yeah, it's kind of like the TARDIS, right? Yeah, like a black hole.
Except in this case, you're bigger on the outside.
Well, here's the thing. At home, everyone knows I'm a nerd, so they think I'm normal. It's the normal me. But when I go out in the world, they're like, dude, you're weird. So
that makes sense. The sense of nerdiness is magnified exponentially once you're walking the streets.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, most people, when they make a podcast, you know what they're doing? There's many reasons, but one of them is to make money. And you know what sells?
What sells?
I don't know if I can say this on the airwaves, but it starts with an S and ends with an X.
Saxophones do make a lot of money. I've always wanted to make money from sax.
Reproduction. This episode is about reproduction. So we can, everybody's going to want to tune in. It's going to be on Instagram. It's going to be all over social media. People are going to be like, ooh, racy, right? And you know what? I'm thinking of starting a website called Only Nerds.
Yes.
That's all I got.
There are so many places I could go with that, but I'll get in trouble. So instead, I'm just going to go to the fact that what Hakeem is referring to is that today's topic is the film Children of Men, which came out in 2006. It was directed by Alfonso Cuarón and co-written by him. And we are looking at the question of species-wide infertility. Does it fly?
Yes, and the species that we're talking about is humans. This episode of Does It Fly is presented by ScreenUK. ScreenUK is a free discovery platform celebrating the very best of UK-produced film, television, animation, and gaming, and sharing it with audiences around the world. ScreenUK is the go-to place to discover your next favorite movie, show, or game, and features tons of exclusive behind-the-scenes interviews and all the info you need to find out how and where to watch or play your newest obsessions wherever you are in the world. Make ScreenUK.org your next stop.
So this movie, basic setup for people who may not be familiar with it, is that we are living in a world in 2027 where there has been species-wide infertility. So there has not been a new baby born around the world for 18 years. And in fact, the youngest person, baby Diego, has just been killed as the movie is opening. So this is the world we find ourselves in.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. I love babies. Toddlers, when they're well behaved, they're the cutest little things. They just melt my heart. I can't imagine the world.
I don't know that you can put toddler and well behaved together. Does that really exist?
They, after the morning madness, they settle into their little mid period, and then before they freak out for the rest of the day,
That's right. You get that golden hour in between. So
that's right. But they are the cutest little things, man. I love babies. A world without babies, a world without toddlers. Can you imagine? Now, we could do with a world without teens.
Hey, I have one of those. No world without teens.
Well, baby, listen, if there's a reproduction issue, it could be related to a hormonal issue. And what makes teens behave like teens probably has to do with hormones.
That is very, very true. So one of the things that I think about that one of the things that I think is interesting about this movie, right? If we talk about, the idea of does this movie fly narratively,
Yeah, right.
is does a world with species wide infertility fly? Does he create a world that we believe in? And the thing is, this film does not go into detail about what caused human infertility. And
No.
I think at a certain point, that really, really might have bothered me. But,
Yeah.
I saw this movie when it first came out
So did
and
I.
I watched
Yeah.
it, I dove back in again to prep for chatting with you about this. And I have to say, I loved it when it first came out. And I loved it, honestly, even more watching it this time. I don't have a problem with the fact that we never find out an exact reason. And that's maybe strange for me because, like, when I'm reading sci fi, I love hard sci fi, right? I love
Yeah.
the sci fi that gets into all of the details about why something is happening and what world has been set up. Like Kim Stanley Robinson's books, like, you are down the science wormhole, to use a term you love so much,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
rabbit hole in my case. You are there. But what I think is so amazing about this movie is that Cuarón has set up a film and done such wonderful world building that the fact that it's sort of nebulous as to what the exact cause of the infertility is doesn't bother me.
Yeah. I don't. It doesn't bother me as well. Also, I don't know what I'm saying, but here is what I'm saying. Here is, so many thoughts are going on at the same time. I don't know which one to grab a hold of, right? So here's the thing that strikes me about it. And this is the thing that I really question because I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
So in the movie, they set up a human reaction to this situation,
Mhm.
right? It becomes sort of not exactly post-apocalyptic, but it's not a
I would
good
say it's like
scene.
mid-apocalyptic, like we are in the
Mid-apocalyptic, yeah.
apocalypse. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way the people behave, and I wonder, in your opinion, do you think that's how people will behave? Because sometimes people behave their best in the worst
Mhm.
crisis.
So that actually is something I'm so glad you brought that up because that's
Yeah.
something I wanted to talk about, right? So we see a lot of different reactions. We see people who are incredibly selfish and just all about their own survival. We see people who go above and beyond and try and help one another. And do you think that there is a biological imperative for survival of the species so that if you knew, or at least thought that you knew, that we're done. There's no more babies coming. These are all the people. That's it.
Yeah.
How does that factor into how you would behave?
Well, as a scientist,
Yeah.
so personally, I'm a good dude. I don't like hurting people. I'm all about love. So I definitely would sort of encourage people to be their best. But what I think about now, when I think about this, is the difference in science then and science now. As an example,
Yeah.
there was a law that was put in place when people began doing research with stem cells and creating embryos in beakers and plexi. What is that glass they use in biology labs? Pyrex. I don't know.
Pyrex. Yes. Pyrex.
Yeah, right. Um, there was a law passed that you could only keep these what do you call them, embryos alive for a period of time before they had to be destroyed to do your research, right? And when they came up with that law, they did not imagine that any of these fertilized eggs, blastocytes and such, would ever reach that duration of life. But very rapidly in recent years, they have, right? And now it certainly seems feasible, right? There was some small animal, a lamb or a goat, was actually bred in a plastic bag and had its own umbilical cord. So the thing about the movie that is sort of out of date is the fact that you probably don't need a womb anymore,
Are
right?
you
If the
talking about
Christ,
Dolly the sheep, or is that different?
no, that was a
That was
clone.
cloning. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to create an artificial womb and grow a
Yes.
mammal
I know what
in
you're
this
talking about.
bag. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the nowadays what we do is, right, all the research will go into how do we create new human embryos and bring them to, complete their gestation cycle artificially, right? Rather than let's just have society fall apart. And you know what it reminds me of? What
What?
is it called? The Brave New World, where people are like, would you like to pillow this evening? Right? It would become that sort of scenario, I think, right?
Right,
So
right.
yeah, so I don't know if I can blame the writers because that was, what year was
No,
it?
I think, in fact, one of the things that I think works in this film narratively, right? So let's go back to the idea, the basic idea of what is good sci-fi, what is good fantasy. It's
Yeah.
when you set up a world, you set up some rules, and then you're actually consistent about it. And one of the things that I think is done so well in this film is the world building that happens through all of the tiny details, right? So, like we were just talking about pillowing, if you look in the background, you will see advertisements for all different kinds of drugs. There's one that's called Niagara, which take on. I don't mix anyway.
What's that,
There's one that's
Niagara?
called it's called Niagara. Yeah, there's one that's called Bliss, which is supposed to make you feel better about things.
Mm.
And then of course, like they talk about how the government gives away suicide kits and antidepressants as part of
Right.
your rations. And so just little things like that make you go,
Yeah.
yeah, they have found ways to cope and deal with this. Also, like, fun
Yeah, that's
fact,
pretty
because
good.
I'm a word nerd. So the suicide kits come from a company called Quietus.
Okay.
Quietus is actually, and I have a hard time believing that Cuarón, who's such a detail-oriented filmmaker, did not put this in there on purpose. So Shakespeare was actually the first to use the term quietus as a metaphor for termination of life. It's in Hamlet's speech.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
deep. Yeah, yeah. You
Mhm.
might be the only person who watched the movie who realizes that.
I don't think I am, but sometimes like my theater nerd and my
Yeah.
nerd combine, and there you go.
Listen, I love the fact that you're a word nerd because I have a all-time favorite nerd word. Can you guess who it is?
I don't know, because you could have a lot of answers for that.
That's true. That's true. George Carlin.
Yes, of course. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
So I'll tell you something. I have a son. One of the issues with being a modern parent is all the kids are consuming media through devices. All right. So books are kind of gone to the wayside. So when he was like 12, right? I'm trying to get him to read books. I'm trying to get him to read books, right? He's a smart kid. He ingests media, he ingests information, but just not in the form of books. So finally, I'm like, here, read this.
What'd
I
you give him?
gave him George Carlin's Brain Droppings.
Nice.
He
Well
loved it.
done.
He loved it. Yeah. He's like, I really like this book.
I've been trying. I will say my daughter's a really good reader, which is
Oh, that's good.
fantastic. But she likes to play the same 3 or 4 artists in the car for music when we're driving. And generally, we like a lot of the same music because I love pop and so does she. We're total Swifties. But that said, sometimes, like, if it's a long trip, I want something else. So she's not so into the audiobooks, but I finally she's a big Gilmore Girls fan because apparently that's like the thing now, watching all the shows from like the 90s and the early
Right. Yeah, I've
aughts.
heard of
It's
this. Yeah.
big in the
Yeah.
teen set. So I got Lauren Graham has a couple of essay books. She played Lorelai Gilmore. So that is what we listen to.
Yeah. I'll
All
tell you,
these tricks.
before getting back to Children of Men, which you got to explain that title to me, but my son also, he loved pop music.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, what is up with you, kid? Right? You're a dude.
Hey, what is wrong with a dude liking pop music?
Nothing. I liked it too, but but in my neighborhood, they thought I was weird because I'm listening to Casey Kasem top 40 every. They're like, dude, that is that. So anyway, he gets to like high school and he goes, yeah, Dad, you're right. Hip hop is the cool music, apparently.
Ah.
And then there's hip hop and there's hip hop. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, Children of Men. Why is it called Children of Men? Do you know?
Well, I think there's a difference there between some of the things that happen in the book and the movie. And, as we talked about in the intro, we're focusing this conversation on the movie because they're so different. What I can tell you is that there's a little bit of a difference in outcome with how fertility is realized in the book. I have not read the book, but like in just sort of digging into the film and some of how it was made. So I think that's one piece of it.
Who's
I,
fertile and who's infertile? Is that
yeah,
what you're getting at? Yeah.
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 And I also know for a fact that Cuarón did not read the book before he got into making the film. And he said the reason for that was because he got the logline for the book. For those listening who aren't familiar, logline refers to sort of what we in the entertainment and media industry call, just sort of your very quick, like 1 to 2 line summary. And so, people use it to pitch things. So he got the pitch for it and was so intrigued by this world of, species infertility that his, beautiful mind was just off and running. But from a personal perspective, if I think about children of men and what that means. Granted, we're in an age where we do not use man to refer to all of humanity anymore.
Yeah,
We're a
right,
bit
right.
sensitive about that now.
Oh,
But going back to when this was made, if you think about children of men, I think about, well, what happened in this world that has been left? What are the children of men doing? Are they reacting with hope? Are they reacting with aggression? How are we treating each other? Because like it could also go another way, right? Like suddenly there's fewer humans. You would think maybe we would take better care of one another and take better care of who's left. Or are you going the total opposite route? Is it human nature to scrabble and just really try and get everything that you can when resources are limited? So in my mind it goes to, what are the children of men doing? How are we reacting to this? I don't know, do
right,
you have thoughts
right.
about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, well, the thing that I think about is the fact that when we do think about humans and human nature, in our minds, we sort of think of it as a static thing. But the way I look at humanity is we are evolving, we are changing with time, and we do react differently. Our technologies become more advanced, we become more connected. But not only that, we are domesticated animals. Right? And so we're so different. If you look at a domesticated animal and compare that
Mhm.
to the wild animal, they're very different from each other,
Yeah.
right? And the normal forces of nature are no longer what's necessarily guiding human evolution and propelling us forward, right? We are the geological force that is shaping ourselves, right? That being said, I feel like that can also extend to, the way we behave is based on what allowed us to survive in the ancestral environment. And that is not what is necessary to survive and thrive in a civilized world where our population density is incredibly tight and we have to all get along or else we can break down into anarchy at any moment. And in this scenario, right, anarchy is a big part of it. And so the question I have is, if you have a futuristic scenario and we've evolved to this high population density way of life, does that create a selection mechanism where those who are anarchists by nature end up not being able to reproduce and reproduce themselves? So we end up all sheep. We're all kind. And we all love each other and take care of each other.
Well, okay, so I have to like riff for just a second on that
Do it.
question. I'm really glad that you bring up animals because in talking about, whether this film flies narratively, the world building is such a key part of that, and so
Yeah.
going back to that question of like, do we invest and do we believe that this world without children could exist in the way that he shows it? You can't talk about this movie without talking about pets and animals. Pets are such a huge part of
Mm.
this, right? So
Mm.
I mean, even in the very, very first scene where, you're in a coffee, one of the very first scenes, and you're in a coffee shop and the newsreel is playing about the death of baby Diego, there's a woman holding her pet. And as you go through this movie, there are animals throughout so many different frames of them. Everybody has pets. You talk about things in the foreground and things in the background. You're constantly seeing ads for things like a cat clothing store and the new line of clothing for dogs and things like that. There's a point where Clive Owen, who plays Theo, goes to see his cousin who runs the Ark of the Arts, which is the place where they have tried to save all of these, art pieces from all around the world, which is so
Yeah.
incredibly sad. But you see him traverse through, kind of going from the rabble all the way, because apparently in the future, high class, low class, economic disparities still continue to exist. You have the haves and the have-nots in the future. So, but when he gets to the wealthier protected part of town, you see it's not just cats and dogs. You see people who have camels and zebras and like crazy fancy poodles. But the amount of love and time and attention and resources that are spent on these animals, to me, is just another detail of this world he's created that seems like a very realistic effect of how people would act and behave. I mean, we see in our own time now,
Yeah. Yeah.
millennials who are like, I'm putting off having kids, like they lather their animals with love and affection and goodies. I mean, on the way here, I passed on the street corner a woman walking her two puppies, and like one of them was outfitted in like a bright pink, like Barbie-esque kind of outfit.
Yeah.
You know, people do that. You know, a lot of my friends who don't have kids, they have animals that are really important to them. So to me, that was something that really rang true on a gut level.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up in thinking about human needs, right? Because I saw something recently about how much hugs and cuddles we need for survival. And of course, there was that famous discovery with the children in the nursery and the failure to thrive. And they found that once the nursing staff cuddled them, they would live longer. So we do need to replace those little toddler cuddles with something else that's small and lovely. And I guess pets could fulfill that role. Yeah, that's a pretty good thing there. So because a child, the platonic love of a child versus your romantic partner, it's a very different thing, right? It's a very, very different thing.
But it is an interesting intimacy kind of a thing, that physical intimacy that you have with another person in your life, whether it's a friend, whether it's, whatever it might, whether it's a lover, a partner, whoever it might be, that touches something that, I think we all experienced a lot of that during COVID when suddenly we were on our own.
I know. I'm a big introvert, and at first I was loving it, but even I was like, okay, enough. let's interact, humans.
All right, so here's the thing. I want to flip this back to, well, okay. So first of all, I just want to like sort of end by saying, in this question of does this movie fly narratively, I give it an unequivocal yes. Yeah, because of the world that he has set up, because of all the details, because of the way that we see people react, even the way that we see people react to Key's baby when they first encounter her. I absolutely think that this flies. That said,
that's it.
What if we knew a little bit more about species-wide infertility? So now I want to kick it back to you for the science of it all to say, tell us a little bit more about the species infertility question and the science of it. Does that fly?
All right. Well, let's talk about flying first. Flying is something you do inside of an atmosphere. If you're in space, you fall, right? That's what, you're falling around the earth and that sort of thing. So does it fly? Does it fall? Because if you're in orbit, you're falling, but you're higher than if you're flying. Anyway, that was an aside. Let's get to the science of species-wide infertility. All right. So geography matters. Culture matters. Okay. So one of the things that surprised me in 2002, I started working in Africa, which I did for like a decade. Okay. And before that, I'm thinking, we're here in America, this super luxurious and well-stocked with everything country. We have everything in the world. And then I start traveling the world and I was like, oh, this is not what I thought. Because we're such a huge cultural influence, everyone has what we have, but we don't have their stuff. Right?
What was the stuff that you noticed that we didn't have?
Okay, for example, if I would go into, now things have changed, some of these things we do have. I would go into a grocery store and I see a big pile of passion fruit. Had never seen that before in an American grocery store.
I want to go to that grocery store because I love passion fruit.
Right? I would love passion fruit were it not for the seeds, just like with blackberries and and so that, the little seeds, and they're like, getting my teeth.
Yeah, that's
like
the fruit that you eat though.
Huh?
You eat the seeds in passion fruit. Like that's the fruit.
Yeah, you do, but I just don't like the texture.
Okay, that's fair. I get that.
Yeah. It's kind of like, why are you putting raisins in my trail mix? But anyway.
I totally get that. I'm not a raisin fan at all. So
like I like raisins in Raisin Bran, but that's it. Otherwise, I want to eat them by themselves.
Okay.
And here's what I mean. Okay, so the whole idea of species-wide infertility that only impacts a single species on the planet is dubious to me. Because I could see a region of the world, right? In America, we have particular systems, infrastructure systems. We have particular foods that we all eat. right? And so something could get in all of us somehow that could affect our ability to reproduce. But the fact that it's also going to get the people in New Zealand, it's going to get the people.
Well, except what about, okay, so from a scientific perspective, what
Yeah.
about things like Zika, right? Like which was
Yeah.
spread by mosquitoes and I
Okay.
mean, and I guess my other question goes to, so when this film was made, we had not at least most of us living had not experienced a worldwide pandemic. And I would have had my doubts as well that something could spread across the entire globe, right? But now we've had this experience of something going all around to
This
ostensibly
is
to
true.
everybody, or at
This
least
is
being
true.
worried about that.
This is
So
true. If it's carried by a virus, it really could impact most of the globe. But what about small islands in the Pacific, right? I went to this small island called Mangaya in the South Pacific, the oldest island in the Pacific, and fewer than 400 inhabitants, no harbor, tiny little dirt airport. And, very rarely were people coming and going in and out of this place. So, you know,
so okay, so taking that one step further, if the science is, it would be very, very difficult to picture something that could spread, something that completely decimate every population on the globe, or every human population on the globe, because there are isolated populations. Do you think that the fact that there is something in this movie called the Human Project, which apparently can only be reached in secret by a boat, means that no, actually, there are these little oases of places
yeah,
where maybe things,
you see where this is going.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think
So
about that?
that's the only problem, right? So the idea of something coming and rendering a species infertile, completely possible, right? Completely possible. But doing it planet wide for a species that is as spread out as we are with all these isolated pockets of human beings, that seems unlikely. But the other thing is, why only one species? Why isn't it affecting mammals, for example? There's a reason why we do experiments on certain species of animals because they are like us. There's a reason why certain diseases jump from certain types of animals to humans and
If you
not from
look at
other
our
types of animals.
DNA, we're not all that different.
Ooh, right? We're all ATCG.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you break it down like that, we're all quarks and electrons. But yeah, so I say the idea of infertility hitting a massive population, hitting most of a species, completely possible. And there's many different ways it could happen, right? The easiest way is for a very highly virulent, easily spread thing like COVID could just take it from human to human to human to human. And if no one is aware that they have it, because the trends, on an isolated basis, you may not know that you're a part of this bigger thing that's occurring because
Right.
some
And
people
at
do
the
get
rate,
pregnant.
I would assume also at the rate at which it occurs. Like if the spread is so fast
Yeah,
without showing symptoms that it jumps, that would be part of it as well, right?
right. Absolutely, it'll be part of it. And the other thing about it is that governments. So, what do you think China would say?
I
Oh,
would
we're having babies. We're having babies left and right. What you think? Oh, that's what's happening to y'all. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of it's because you're immoral and sinners. That's why you're not having
Yeah,
babies.
well, and we see some of that in the movie
Yeah,
actually, which
yeah,
again I
yeah.
think is another very realistic reaction to a world that is not reproducing. Like clearly we brought this upon ourselves. Clearly
Right.
God does not love
Yeah,
us, and clear,
yeah,
So
yeah. Right. We're you brought it on yourself. You're,
exactly, it's all
but
your
think
fault.
about this. There are people who have a difficult time uh, conceiving,
Yeah, I know
right? And
many
they
of them.
try and they try and they try. So what's going to happen is industry is going to fail first. They're not going to be working so hard to conceive. They're not going to have time to go out, take care of the economy and these sort of things. Because people are desperate to have children, and I think that that's going to impact behavior on a very fundamental level.
I think so. Although, I mean, I will say right now, like I sadly know a lot of people who are desperately trying to conceive, and
Yeah.
it's hard and it definitely affects work. I mean, I will say our society is certainly not set up to support women who are trying to have kids and having a
Oh,
tough
wait a
time with it.
minute. Wait, I've helped a lot of women. Just kidding. That's
Getting back to that making money thing
listen. I'm trying to survive out here in this world tomorrow. Whatever I can do to make a buck,
Okay, all right.
it's legal. It's not, if it's not against the law, just so everybody watch this. Right now I am running a special. If you want a genius baby,
Oh my God. All right, let's get back to the causes of worldwide infertility. All right.
So, there are a number of
about environment, like as far as climate.
Absolutely. And I can see something like, for example, suppose a government is doing space research and they're putting some aerosols in the upper atmosphere, for example, and it's some chemical, and it can result, because of the winds of Earth, it could spread around the world and result in infertility for people. So there is the virus as a vector. Then there's, but the question is, how can you do something that's global, right? So
right, and that's one of the questions I had. Like, there's a scene. So we see a lot of cows in this movie.
Yeah, because cows are
There's a couple of scenes where we actually see cows that appear to be burning. And I will also say, like, another genius piece of this film, I think, in the storytelling of it, is the fact that if you look, there actually aren't a ton of close-ups in this film. We often see mid-range shots where Clive Owen is sort of equal in frame, which whatever is happening behind him or out the window. We see him on a lot of trains and buses and things like that. And that is because when you have a close up, all of your attention goes to the character, right? But when you have, a shot where they're equal, you also pay a lot of attention to the context. That's the filmmaker subtly telling you both of these things are important. And I found myself constantly, I mean, granted, I do love looking at Clive Owen's face. It is hard to pull myself away from that. But I did find myself, looking out the bus windows as he was going by somewhere, or looking out the train windows, whether we were seeing the countryside or, gritty futuristic London that they've created. And so we see these burning cows a couple of times. And there's a point where we actually see cows that look like they're in some kind of very polluted river. And then in sort of the far background, we see a bunch of factories. And so I sort of intimate from that there's been a lot of factory pollution, which is, then polluting the water, polluting the farmland. And of course, what do we all do? We eat these animals or drink milk. And then, of course, you've got this scene with Key where she reveals her pregnancy.
Right. Yeah.
Cows.
Yeah. But look, there are parts of the world that are not industrialized. That's
Right.
That's why I don't like a pollution type, unless it is something that's upper atmosphere and, there's a lot of it happening, and maybe it's some new chemical, or maybe people are sitting, like there's a chemical that we use in rocket propellant, hydrazine, right? It's very toxic. And so, it could be something like that, like the world we're going to go away from petroleum. We found this new super molecule, and then we put it in all the planes and all the cars, and it just gets all in the atmosphere, and then suddenly no one can have a baby or make a baby, right? On that note, I have to take a brief break to make a baby, and then like seconds, and I'll be right back. I have to plug in my laptop. You saw me looking down. I was texting my son, help.
I was like, where's this going?
I plugged it into the laptop, but forgot to plug it into the wall.
I don't know if the fact that it'll only take you a second to make a baby is something you want to brag about, but like,
think about how many babies I can make in an hour. So,
okay, so we've got a couple of possibilities. So you're saying it doesn't, maybe not so realistic to have pollution on the ground as a cause of worldwide, but if it's something that's distributed via air, etc., then maybe. We're saying maybe a virus.
Maybe a virus. Yeah.
And then I wasn't clear on like what your thoughts about climate change as a cause of worldwide species infertility.
That is interesting. I don't know how that would manifest. Like, how could that work? So, okay, I got one for you.
All right, let me hear it.
You know what it is? The Last of Us.
I have not seen The Last of Us yet, so no spoilers.
Okay, well, all I have to say is I am very impressed with fungi, and it's everywhere, right? And it's everywhere. And what's happening is, certain types of fungi can only exist in certain temperature ranges.
So,
But
okay, so this I'm familiar with because there's actually a book called,
mm,
but it's a similar premise to The Last of Us, which is the
right.
cordyceps that comes in and takes over, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole idea is because of the climate warming, the
Mhm.
cordyceps learns to survive at higher temperatures and now can actually infect human bodies. So if there is a fungi, because they spread via spores, so they can spread on the wind and go everywhere. Fungi spores could get in humans around the world before we knew it. If it's something new, if it's something that mutated, and it could result from climate change. That was the answer. Climate change could be the trigger to cause the mutation that causes it to not only change its own molecular way of being, but
Mhm.
also allow it to now infect human beings in such a way that we don't even know it's there, right? So maybe it gets inside of humans and goes straight to the ovaries.
Well, I mean, the other thing too that we haven't really talked about
Yeah.
is we haven't talked about whether the cause of infertility comes from men or women. We haven't.
Women, right? It's the women who can't. I thought that's what the premise in the movie is, that it's the women who can't conceive.
I believe so, but
Yeah.
it still takes a nice little sperm from a man to help a woman conceive. So is it? I mean, the women may not be able to conceive, but I sadly know plenty of couples who
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be a woman's fault. So like, if all of the men suddenly have sperm that aren't working properly,
Well, that is climate change, right? Because of the heat.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
why testicles are outside of the body. Like,
Don't
oh,
put
it
your
doesn't help.
laptop on your lap.
Does that work?
No, you're not supposed. I don't know.
No, I'm saying, could you make yourself infertile so that you're safe in a
Safe.
way?
That is an entirely different approach to birth control.
Let me microwave these before I go out to the club.
Oh boy. All right. So on that note, we've talked about the what
Okay,
ifs of how
right.
worldwide species infertility can work. But as far as children of men, the way it is in this movie, does the science of this movie fly when it comes to worldwide human infertility?
I have to give an answer, and it's not going to be ambiguous, but it may come off that way initially, right? It's going to be solid. And the answer is yes, it does fly. Because they don't tell us why it happened. So if we can think of reasons that make it happen, then we have to give them credit for that, right?
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
So it flies. There are possible ways that we could pull out of our heads, right? We came up with the virus, we came up with the aerosols, we came up with the fungal approach. And, each of these are plausible. They don't exist now, but
Thank goodness
plausibly,
they don't exist now. That is a good thing.
that's a good thing. It
Yeah.
could happen. But, this brings up to me a philosophical question about humanity. And that is that we always assume that tomorrow is going to come, right? We talk about leaving a better world for our children and that sort of a thing. And so this is a world where they're saying there is not going to be a tomorrow. There aren't going to be children. You don't have to think about your grandchildren, right? So first off, let's just go crazy on fossil fuels, right?
Right.
There's no need to save anything. Let's go cut down those trees and make a lot of money before we go, right?
Yeah. There's that.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, right? Like, how does that impact the human psyche? Because even in physics, right? Even as a physicist, we assume that the laws of physics, as we know them, as we can see into the past, have been the same throughout history. There's nothing in the laws of physics that tell us that tomorrow they will continue to be the same, right? We just take that as a given. And it's the same way with reproducing ourselves and having children that are going to carry on our legacy, carry on our DNA.
Wait, I have to ask you a science question. You totally just distracted me. if the laws of physics were going to change, what would cause the laws of physics to change? I mean, where my mind went to was that, and I don't know if this would change the laws, but it would change maybe the way things operate on Earth, is that if something else very, very large came in orbit around the Earth, those kinds of things. I don't know. You tell me, you're the
No,
scientist.
no, it's things like the biggest thing is temperature. So it's already happened, right? If you go back in we have four fundamental forces right now, the four cardinal forces: the nuclear force is strong and weak force, and the long range force is gravity and electromagnetism. Well, if you go back in the past to the very early universe when things were much hotter, you can't tell the electromagnetic force apart from the weak force. They become one. Go even further in the past, you get the strong force now combined with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Called grand unified theory. So in the future, because the universe is expanding, it gets colder, right? You take a gas and expand it, its temperature goes down. Could it be that new forces are going to freeze out, right? Or an existing force may split, right? Now, we're on a planet that's bathed in sunlight and it has an atmosphere and an ocean and ground that retain heat. So saying something is affecting the universe as a whole is going to affect us locally is a bit of a stretch. But, but for that matter, that's under those conditions, perhaps, right?
Great. Hey, well, you know me. I'm all about the what if. So
all about the what if. I'm with you on that. And that's one of my favorite sci-fi series, right? The what if little comics and the shows that come from it. I love those. So what if? And that's what I think this movie is, Children of Men. What if this happened? How will humans behave? So you say it flies narratively. I say it flies scientifically because they give us the out of not going into detail. So we are free to fill in the blank.
Fill it in.
Yeah. So now.
That brings us to our third question about, does it fly?
Absolutely.
Does it fly because it's just so cool and so amazing to watch?
And that one for me, I was a little depressed. I don't know about, it's kind of like, you ever see this movie? I think it stars, who was the woman that starred in the very first Bring It On? What's her name?
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst. Yeah. She had this movie where it was the end of the world. This other planet was going to collide with Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched that movie, I was like, wow, Kirsten Dunst can act. Which I didn't realize.
Kirsten Dunst can definitely act. Yeah.
Yeah, but that movie showed it. But man, I was on business travel and I went out to the theater alone and watched that movie. And I was so depressed the rest of the night. Yeah. So this movie wasn't as depressing to me, but that's an impact. Did you love the movie? Yeah, but. Right? So this one is a yeah, but for me. What is it for you?
Oh, for me, there's no but in this movie whatsoever. I love this movie. And yeah, is this movie depressing? Absolutely, of course. But I also think that it makes you think. It makes
does.
you think
It
about
does. Yeah.
How would you react if this happened? Going back to our question before about would your reaction to this world come out of kindness? Or would your reaction to this movie be one of aggression and, trying to take care of your own people? How do you, there's the whole piece when they get to the refugee camp where there's the woman who they never really say where she's from, but she doesn't speak English. And she helps them because she believes in this, I sort of intuit, that she believes in this potential future of humanity. She chooses hope. And the whole story of Clive Owen's character, right, is one that he starts off as this very sort of apathetic, I think he's working in some kind of government job. He's, obviously drinking a whole lot, and he is disconnected. And even the people in his office haven't disconnected yet. You go into the office and you see his boss has all of these, I think it's all this cricket stuff on his desk. And another worker has all these little figurines. And these are people who are still invested in life and in caring about something, no matter what it is. He is not. And through the journey of the film, you see him become this reluctant hero, but you see he's someone for whom hope was kind of dead, and then suddenly it becomes fertile again. And to me, that is a beautiful journey. And it makes me think about the world and what kind of world I maybe want to live in. So being is this world that he's created is so rich, whether you're looking at the cows or the long shots or, all the advertisements. I sort of have a closing question for you that I was curious about. So let's say we put ourselves in this very rich world that, Caron and all of his amazing crew and collaborators have created together. We have a couple of options, right? So we see in the beginning, we see Theo, Clive Owen's character, living in London with many people who, the grittier part of London, with many people who, are clearly just trying to get by, trying to still live the life that they knew.
Yeah.
So it's one version. Then we go and we visit Jasper. How have we not talked about Michael Caine at all yet? Okay, so we go and we visit his friend Jasper, who I couldn't quite tell if he was like a relative, like an uncle, or if he was a mentor of his. But clearly, he's older. He's a friend. He's played by Michael Caine, and Jasper lives with his wife, who clearly has been affected by something because she doesn't speak. She's in a wheelchair. He's taking care of her, and he seems to live more of a reclusive life. He's out in a protected house, which is sort of deep in the woods. It's protected. It has a perimeter. It's hidden. He grows a special variety of weed that he calls strawberry cough, which apparently tastes like strawberries, and then after you inhale, you
cough.
Yeah. So he's got strawberry cough. He uses it to barter and get things. He seems to. So that's sort of like he's retreated. He said, okay, our species is coming to an end. I'm going to go, live sort of this bucolic life on the land. And then you have people who are activists, like the folks who belong to this ostensible human project and are off on the boats and trying to fight for whatever that future might be. Which version of life in this world do you think you'd be most likely to find yourself in? Are you going to go city?
No, I'm going with the weed.
Or the boat?
The weed. Like,
I knew you were going to say that.
Do I still have internet? Like,
All right. So you say it flies scientifically. I say it flies narratively. We both say it flies as far as it's super cool and we liked it.